Hello everyone, and welcome to Varasset's October of 2019 User Group meeting. Today on the agenda, we will be covering @mention capability within Varasset, prerequisites, and compatible unit estimating. A quick note to those of you who are watching on YouTube after the fact, there are timestamps in the description that will allow you to jump ahead in the action. Now, without any further ado, I'm going to hand it off over to Ryan, who's going to talk to you about @mentions and prerequisites.
Varasset 6.6 introduced @mentions, and there was really a need here to be able to communicate effectively throughout the process of a work order or really any record that you're working with. Things like workflow and work order templates and tasking and assignments, these are all great because you can plan ahead on your tasking and you plan on your assignments and have Varasset automate a lot of the business process for you. But there are times when something happens and basically that workflow and tasking can only get you so far, and you need to be able to actually effectively communicate. Engineers, schedulers, and field crews need to be flexible, and they need to be able to provide reliable information so that people can make decisions. And then information also needs to propagate to keep people quickly so that time isn't wasted. If somebody has an issue out in the field and it requires more material get ordered, and somebody is taking several days in order to see that status, then it just delays your projects. So being able to quickly comment and mention somebody and have them be notified immediately of that comment is a way to move the ball along, keep it rolling. So @mentions gives you the tool to do that. So this is kind of an overview of the @mentions feature before we kind of get into the live demo. But basically, all records in Varasset that are kind of primary records have a conversation pane. And if anybody's on Varasset 6, you've probably seen this conversation pane. What effectively you can do is you can just type in the @ symbol and start typing in a person or a team that you want to mention in your comment. So you can see here on the right, I started typing RY, and I started getting a kind of a lookup on all the different teams and people in my system that I could mention as part of this. And it would continue to resolve as I type, or I could start selecting, key down, arrow down, or select with the mouse a person or somebody from that list, and it would fill it in for me. And then I can continue to type in my comments. So you've got kind of a searching and autocomplete functionality to either a person or to a team. And then when that gets posted to the conversation pane, along with what you normally would see there in terms of the actual comment, who did it, and when, the system will resolve the email addresses for all the people or the teams that have been mentioned and send them that comment in an email. So let's just kind of show this a little bit here. So here I've got my dashboard here, and I'm going to open up a work order that I'm working with here, and I'm just going to do one that I need to go do some surveying out in the field, and I want to just be able to mention somebody in order to give them a status update on where I am on this work. So I'm going to say, I'm going to let Corey know here that I'm not going to be able to make it out until next week. Okay. Okay, so adding that comment had him highlighted here so I can see exactly who I @mentioned, and then an email gets queued up so that he can get emailed of the comment. So because I @mentioned him, I don't have my inbox here, but what I'll do is show a sample email that I've actually just got recently. So here's a sample comment of telling me that a comment was made on this work order, and here's the comment and when it was made, and I can click on here to view the hyperlink to the record. So that would immediately log me into Varasset if I've already had a session open to that record, and I could see the comment and respond to it if I need to. That's kind of the extent of mentions. Again, most of our records support this same functionality, so that's something that will be available in 6.6 and beyond. And you know, I don't know if we have any questions about that. It's a pretty simple feature. If anybody's ever used you know, like a Slack or Microsoft Teams and things like that, it should be something that's pretty familiar. Okay.
I'm not seeing any questions here. Again, my apologies for the on and off on the audio. We've been having a hard time just keeping the presenter mic on. So if you could mute yourself so we keep down other confusing feedback and things, that would be helpful. And again, I will be keeping an eye on chat for any questions.
Okay. Next topic we're going to talk about is prerequisites. And again, this is something that was added in Varasset 6.6. So first, before we get into that, let's get a little bit into kind of how we view work management and how prerequisites kind of fit into that. So here's the work management process from kind of start to finish at a very high level. So you start with initiation of the work, and that can include things like I got a work request from my CIS, I might have follow-up work from another work order, I might need to be doing some capital work that was planned, or at the management side, I've hit some preventive maintenance that I want to do on some assets. And then I get into my design, and that might include things like planning my work via work order templates, and templates give you things like the tasking that you need to do for that type of job, or maybe the material that you might need. But also I might need to do an actual design. So if I want to do a design, that's when we might hit the compatible unit estimating that Corey's going to show here. Then you get to the approval of the work and getting the work scheduled and assigned, and also maybe requisitioning materials for the work or checking that you've got the material in stock in your storerooms. Then you go through to conduct the work, you get your actuals, the amount of labor that you use, the material that you use, things like that, and you follow up with work completion and closing. So prerequisites kind of gives you a lot of ability to provide flexible ways to task out what you need to do in order to start the work. So it kind of fits in this middle section here around approvals and requisitioning material, everything that you would do prior to starting work. So let's just kind of show this here. So in Varasset, kind of the central figure for work management is, of course, the work order. Work orders can relate to each other, so you can have work orders that are made up of other work orders, and you can have work orders that are related to a financial project. So if you've got maybe like your ERP for finance, if you want to relate your work order to the financial project for funding and budget tracking, that's how we do that. Work orders also have tasks. So I'm going to talk about here the difference between a task and a prerequisite and a child work order and when you would get into this. But work orders have tasks and now prerequisites. So that's kind of what we added here. And along those lines, there's a lot more on work order. You can plan your work for material, how much labor you're going to use, things like that. You can get your actuals. You can do purchasing. You can schedule and assign. You can acquire permits. You can have estimates, and then you can have tickets, which are kind of issues that arise through the work that you might want to log, or any closing activities that need to exist beyond the closing of the work order can be created as tickets. So that's kind of like a very high-level summary and kind of where prerequisites fit in. But let's talk about the actual work breakdown structure a little bit. So a lot of people ask me when we do implementations, what's the difference when I use a child work order versus a task versus now a prerequisite. So let's kind of make that clear here. So a work order, when you're on a work order and you want to create a child work order, that is going to give you full-blown work management functionality. So everything that comes with work management, that includes being able to do an estimate, getting actuals, using the scheduling tool, and that's going to be a future functionality where that's going to be a graphical scheduler, doing assignments, and then those child work orders can include their own tasks and prerequisites. So you get like the full gamut of what a work order provides. It's often the best choice when different types of work is being done on different assets or locations. And then especially if there's a financial impact. So if you want to do budget tracking, a work order is going to be a better choice than a simple task. If you want to model out different parts of the work at different locations or different assets, then child work orders are better. Tasks and prerequisites are not necessarily aware of all of the asset location information. So if you have work that you want to organize or group by the asset or location, a child work order is a better option for that. Tasks. So with tasks, they're kind of the bottom level of the work order breakdown structure tree. You cannot have any child tasks on a task. So task is the bottom level. So they're meant to provide simple things like I need to do this and be able to sequence them on my work order. So you can see things like from a task you can do very simple scheduling, statusing, and assignment. And then it documents the steps to complete the work at a single given asset or location. So again, tasks are meant to be specific to its parent work order. So if a parent work order is on a particular asset, like I'm doing work on a transformer, the tasks list is assuming that all the steps are at that work order's asset or location. Prerequisites, again, new to Varasset 6.6. So whereas tasks provide the ability to define the steps to complete the work once it's started, prerequisites give you a place to store the activities that you need to do in order to even start the work. So things that need to be completed before you even begin it. They can be added to work order templates. So if anybody is using work order templates to give you tasks today, you can go into your work order templates and start adding prerequisites as well. So when you say that I'm doing this particular type of job, you can have Varasset automatically create you the child tasks and prerequisites for that type of job. They can be configured, again, based on the factors of the job, so not just on the work order templates. They can be created manually as well on your specific work order if you need them. And they can also be given based on certain factors. So examples of these might be, I flagged my work order as this is going to be a billable work order. So the system can be configured to create you an invoicing prerequisite. You got to invoice and get the bill before we start the work. Or it can be things like I've done a design on my work order, and my design says that I'm going to be setting a new pole. So when I've accepted that design, the system might be able to be configured to give you a dig-safe permitting prerequisite as a result. So there can be some intelligence into how we build these prerequisites. And then the kind of the end effect of this is that when you submit your work order to say that this is now ready or it's in progress, Varasset's going to be validating that all of the prerequisites have been dealt with in some way. So they have to be completed or canceled, like I don't need to actually fulfill this. You have to deal with the prerequisites in some way before you can actually move your work order and start the work. So let's show a little demonstration. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a work order with a work order template that I have. So click on work order templates. And I've just got like a simple line extension work order template here. So my work order template gives me things like what I want my description to be, the category of the work, the type, and then who might be supervising this work when I create a work order using this template. It It also gives me the ability to specify any child work orders that I might want and my tasks and prerequisites. So I've got here my task list. Here, once my work order is starting, I need to assign the crew and do the staking and, do the pole and anchor work and do the construction and restock any unused materials and so forth. But before I start my work, I want, the lead engineer to review the design, and I need to prepare the contract and invoice the work, confirm all my materials are in stock or on order, and get all my necessary permits. So I've kind of just outlined some steps to do this type of line extension, and I'm going to create a work order using this. So if I go to this work order tab, work item tab here, I can see all my my work breakdown structure there. So again, my child work orders, my tasks, and my prerequisites. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, well, let's say that I removed status from here. So let's see my status of these prerequisites. So let's say that I want to just go ahead and say let's move this. Let's move this to released. I want to release this work order. I don't have any of my prerequisites done yet, but I'm going to release it and hit OK, and it's telling me, hey, I need to either complete or close all my prerequisites before advancing the work order. So as I work through these, I can open up my prerequisites and assign them out, put due dates on them, put comments, things like that, like I would be able to with any existing task. And I want to just complete all these. So I'm going to highlight them all and then say change status. So I'm going to move the status to completed, hit OK. All right, so I've completed my prerequisites, and now I should be able to move my work order. Let's change my status of my work order to release. So now my status is released. So we got a comment from Lorinda, our prerequisites assigned to a user or team, and they can be either one. So you have the option of assigning to either a person or a team, similar to tasks. All right. Any other questions? That's basically the extent of prerequisites.
All right, yeah, we're good. All right, so we are going to be covering compatible unit estimating. This is a feature that's been in Varasset for a little while. However, we have been constantly adding to it, adding new features, evolving it. So we wanted to review this with you guys so you know what's available. So we're going to be covering what are compatible units, how does Varasset implement compatible units, how can compatible units help you in your business, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end, or feel free to ask any questions in the chat box as we move through this. Compatible units are used to standardize, group, and relate units of work, such as materials, labor, tools, and services. CUs are very flexible, and they can represent anything from individual items, such as a pole or an anchor, or they can be used to represent entire structures, such as a pole with a cross-arm assembly. CUs support a hierarchical structure, allowing you to build larger assemblies from smaller units while maintaining CUs independently. This gives you the great flexibility of designing your CU structures and flexibility during the estimation process. So this chart here shows sample CU structure. So at the top level, you can see we have an installation for a framed pole with a transformer, and that would be our highest level CU in this example. Underneath that CU are several other CUs. We have install framed pole and install transformer, which are their own CUs in their own right, and those can be managed independently. And underneath installed frame pole, you can see we have the installation of the pole itself, the installation of the cross arm, and those each consist of their own labor sets. In Varasset, we have implemented a filter and adder system into our compatible unit module, and this provides you with fine-grained control over the materials and labor costs that get used during the estimation process. And specifically, filters are used to limit the addition of material or labor lines to certain conditions. So for an example, you may want to include an anchor alongside a pole installation if the soil condition was found to be sandy or loose, but the anchor may not be needed in your typical installation, so you wouldn't want to have it added to your estimate and charge your customer for that anchor in every situation. And the filter allows you to have a single CU that will match both of those conditions, and it cuts down kind of the clutter in the system, so you're not having to create one CU for a pole installation with an anchor and a separate CU with a pole installation without the anchor. Adders are used in conjunction with filters, but rather than narrowing the labor lines that are used in the estimate, they instead add a designated percentage to the cost for the given labor line. And this can be used to add additional labor costs to work on like an energized line, for example. So if you have a lineman out there working, doing an installation, if the line is non-energized, you might have one price for that work, but if the line happens to be energized, maybe you have an overhead charge because it's going to take longer. An adder gives you the ability to account for that additional charge. In Varasset, compatible unit estimates can consist of one or many estimate versions. This allows you to estimate the same job many ways and then compare the costs for each approach quickly and easily. For example, you may create an estimate version strictly using inside labor and then estimate the same job using contracted labor. With Varasset, you can easily compare the costs of these two estimates side by side. The other benefit versioning gives you is the ability to keep the historical record of the design of your work as it changes over time, as each estimate version is maintained independently in Varasset. Estimate versions are further broken down by work locations. Work locations are used to represent different locations on the same job. And what this breakdown gives you is the flexibility of defining different filter values and different contracted rates at different locations of your job. For example, a given job might contain sandy soil in one location, but maybe across the street where you might be installing a second pole, maybe the soil is more rocky, and maybe different materials are needed in different locations, so you might have different filters at each work location. So this breakdown allows you to set different conditions even on the same estimate.
Here's a question we've got. I don't know, can you even see it?
Oh,
well, I'll tell you, it's are the prerequisite, sorry, forgive me, go on. Yeah, it popped up again. I'm researching GoToMeeting mute issues, sorry about that.
So what this chart here is just a sample breakdown structure of a typical estimate. So at the top level, you can see that we have our estimate, and underneath that we have two different estimate versions. And at the estimate version level, we've defined a soil condition of normal, and that the line that is being worked on is cold, so it is not energized. Underneath this estimate version, we have multiple work locations. In this example, they happen to be 3 different poles. And you can see that the filter conditions copied down from the estimate version, but they are editable at the work location level. So you'll notice pole 1, we've changed the soil condition from normal to sandy. The line is still cold. Work location 2, the soil condition is normal, and the line is hot. Pole 3, soil condition normal, and the line is cold. So with these work location breakdowns, you can change these conditions at a lower level than at your estimate. Underneath the work location, you have work sets. You can have many work sets underneath the work location. And again, this just gives you the ability to further break down and change your working conditions even at a lower level. And then underneath your work set is where you start adding your CUs to your estimate. So in this example, we have a 45-foot pole, class 2. We have a quantity of 2, meaning we have 2 poles at that location. The work objective is to install. We have insulator, and we have some wire. And you'll notice that even at the CU level, you have those filter conditions. And again, you can change those filters at this level again. So you have really fine-grained control of setting your conditions when you're estimating. Varasset makes it incredibly simple to create a job plan from your estimate. In fact, it's as simple as a click of a button. In Varasset, once the design is chosen as the accepted design for a job, there's a simple action the user can run, which will add all of the planned materials, labor, tools, and services from the estimate directly to the work order. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and we'll bring up Varasset and we'll show what all of this looks like in the application itself. So I'm going to cover setting up the filters and adders first, just because that's going to provide better context for when we review CUs and estimates later on. So Varasset ships with a total of 30 possible filters. You're given 10 material filters, 10 labor filters, and 10 accounting filters. They all are inactive to begin with, and it's up to you to kind of define what conditions you want to account for. So I've created a simple material filter here as an example. I gave it a description of soil condition, and the description is the name that you will see everywhere else in the system. So when you're looking at your estimate and you have a list of filters, you're going to see soil condition. And then you have a list of values, and you can add as many values as you see to be necessary. In this example, I have two. I have sand and rock. And you'll notice that I have my filter marked as active. I also created a single labor filter. And the description here is hot and cold. And again, this is going to represent whether or not the line is energized or not. And the difference between material filters and labor filters is what line items you're going to be applying them to on your compatible unit. Material filters are going to be applied against your materials. So your pole, your wire, insulators, any sort of material item will be able to have a material filter applied. Where your labor filter is going to be applied against your labor line items. So your linemen, your technicians, all of your hourly rates. The other setup item that we have in Varasset are loading types. And you can create as many different loading types as you want. And essentially your loading types are going to be overheads that are applied to your estimate. In this example, I have a payroll overhead at a rate of 5%. And on your estimate, you can choose whether or not you want to apply these loading types. And they get calculated in at the end of the estimating process. Once the final cost has been calculated, these overheads get applied as percentage adders. And then the other piece to the filter adder equation is the adders themselves. So I have a single adder that I have set up for this demonstration. And the adders work in conjunction with your filters. So this is an adder to that hot or cold labor line, or labor filter. And I've tied this adder to the value of hot. And I've given it a value of 25. And the value represents a percentage increase to the cost. And I'll demonstrate how this affects the estimate here in a minute. But just as far as setup goes, you're really just specifying which labor filter you want the adder to be applied to, what value of that filter is going to cause this adder to take effect, and then the percentage increase of cost that you want this adder to give. All right, so this is the CU browse screen. So this is where you would see all of your compatible units. In this demonstration, all of our compatible units are level 0. So these are bottom level CUs. They are non-hierarchical. And we'll take a look at this 40-foot pole as an example. You can see that you have a unit of measure. So this is how the CU is charged out. So we are charging for each pole in this instance. You have a list of materials that are needed on the CU. So you can see here we have a pole. The work objective is install. This is the rate that we are charging to install this particular pole. You have your line cost. You can tie it to an item. And then we also have this, you have the ability to flag a CU as being absolute. And what absolute CUs give you the ability to do are specify, like, if there's like a flat rate for a CU is when you would apply like an absolute. So if you have, like for a pole installation, if there's a guaranteed 2-hour setup on top of any other labor to install that pole, regardless of how many poles are being installed, you would have an absolute labor line on your compatible unit to represent that setup. And essentially when you're doing your estimating and you're setting the quantity of how many of that CU you're going to need, that quantity doesn't get multiplied across your absolute value. So essentially you're saying this is a flat 2-hour setup. I'm not going to multiply it by my quantity. You can see that we have that material filter here, soil condition. I don't have any values selected on the pole. And that means that whenever I add this CU to my estimate, the pole is always going to be included. I also have an anchor on this CU. And you can see that the material filter I have selected here is sand. And by selecting this material filter, when I apply this compatible unit to my estimate, the anchor is only going to be included if I flag my estimate or my work location as having sandy soil. This way, this anchor isn't included in all of my other full installation estimates if it's not needed. I have a list of worker hours that are needed for this pole installation. I only have one in this example. I just have 6 hours of lineman skill. I see my line cost. And here I have labor filters. And similar to the material filter, it's just a drop down and you can select the value. And that works in the exact same way. If I were to select cold, the hours for this lineman would only be applied if I flagged the filter on my estimate as cold. The difference with labor filters is you can also have adders, and that's what this checkbox next to the filter is. If I check this box, I'm saying that I want to apply that hot-cold adder to this line item. And if you remember when we set up our adder, we did tie it to the hot-cold filter and we specified a value of hot. When I check this box, it means on my estimate, if the line I'm working on is hot, it's going to add that 25% to this line cost. If the line isn't hot, it's not going to add that overage. And just as a demonstration of what it would look like to set up a hierarchy of CUs, just so you can see how easy it is. On the compatible unit, you have the ability to create children. If I click create here, you can see I just picked the CU that I want to apply as the child, and then I can have a quantity. So you can have one compatible unit that has a child of another compatible unit. You can say it actually requires, more than one of those children to build the parent. And you also have labor, material, and accounting filters at this level as well. And those work in much the same way as we'll demonstrate on the estimate. So that's really all the setup that goes into the compatible unit module. Now we'll take a look at estimating. So our estimation module supports templatizing estimates, which makes it quick and easy to create and modify estimates for common types of work. So I have a sample make-ready estimate template here that I will open, and we'll walk through this. So I have one estimate version in this template. And you can see here in the estimate version edit screen, I have my filters down below. I have my labor filters with hot or cold. I have my material filters with the different soil condition values. I can also specify a version type. And we support several different version types. We have design, which flags the version as being used as designing your job. We have cost only, which means it's used for previewing costs or providing cost-only estimates to customers. Cost-only versions can't be added to the work plan, so that's kind of what separates them from design. We have as-built, and as-built are used to perform as-builting at the end of a job's life cycle. So if you have a difference in the materials used than what you had originally designed, you can create an estimate version as an as-built, and then this gives you the ability to compare your as-built structures and materials used on the job compared to how it was designed, and that will show you any differences in those. So you can, have like lessons learned, or kind of learn from the differences between your design and your as-built. And then the final one is test, and testing is just to flag that this version was used as a test. We're not using it. We're not going to be adding it to our work order plan. We're not using it as an as-built. It was simply built as a test. We'll go to the version details of this template. And you can see here that I've added 4 CUs to this template. I have a pole, 45-foot class 2 pole. I have a couple different insulator posts, and some wire. And I've set the quantity to 1, as this is a template. I may not know the exact quantities I'm going to need on the actual estimate. Okay, looks like there was a question. Pull that up here. Can you change the versions in flight? So you can create as many versions as you want, and you can create new versions even when you have open previous versions that are still open. So you can add as many of these as you want at any time. You can only accept when you accept a design, and we'll kind of get to this in a minute, as the accepted one, and it blows out that design to your work order. If you were to come back and accept a second version, what the system will do is remove all of the labor, material, tools, and services off of the work order from the original accepted design, and then add the materials and tools and things from the newly accepted design. Does that kind of answer your question there, Lorinda? If you have more questions after I keep going, feel free to ask, and we'll address it. So I'd like to go ahead and show how we can apply these templates and what it looks like to actually do the estimating process. So I'm going to create a new estimate. I'm going to go ahead and target a work order, and essentially what this is doing is telling the estimate which work order it's being built against. So when I accept a design, it knows where to put all those materials and labor. And just to demonstrate that we don't currently have any plans on this work order, we'll go ahead and take a look. So you can see we don't have any planned labor, materials, or services yet. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save my estimate, and I'm going to go ahead and run the apply estimate template. And I'm going to select that make ready estimate template that we were just looking at. All right, so you can see it added that estimate version, and it copied down all of those compatible units from that template. One other thing I do want to point out on versions is we do support the ability to accept contributions, and what contributions are upfront payments from the customer. So sometimes you might have a customer's, you might say that you need to pay a certain dollar amount upfront before we start this project, or maybe even a percentage. You have the ability to apply those contributions onto your different versions, and those contributions are taken into account once you perform the estimate and you are reviewing your costs. I'm going to go back to the version details. Again, as I pointed out earlier, all of my quantities are set to 1, just because I wanted them set to 1 on my template. But now that we're actually doing the the estimate, I can modify these quantities, and I can say, okay, I'm going to need 2 insulators, 2 poles, 500 feet of wire, and 2 insulator posts. So it's extremely quick and easy to change these quantities. And now that I have my quantities set, I'm going to go ahead and actually perform the estimate on this. I'm going to go ahead and click the estimate button. And you'll notice my status changed from open to estimated. I can go over to the costs tab, and I get a nice breakdown of all of the labor, material, tool, and service costs that were added to this estimate. You can see that we have the applied contributions here. I didn't add any to this example, but if the customer had paid upfront contributions, that would be shown here, and it would be deducted from your total estimated cost because it's expected that they had already paid those contributions. So let's say I want to estimate this same estimate, but tweak it a little bit. If there's a need to do this, we do have a copy function, and the copy function will copy the version exactly as it was, and this gives you a nice starting point so you're not having to start over from scratch if you're making small changes. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll just change the quantity of wire, add another pole, just so we have some different values to look at. One other thing you may do, as I had mentioned earlier, is apply contracted rates. We do allow you to specify contractors on your version and then tie those contractors to your specific work sets and work locations. You can pick a contract if you have it associated to your estimate, and when it performs the estimate calculation, it'll use that contracted rate. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and estimate my version 2. Go to costs, you can see in the cost grid, you get a list of all of your versions, and this gives you a nice side-by-side view of your different pricing, your different costs. So you can see the differences very easily. We also have a report to do a further cost comparison. So if I do an estimated cost comparison, I can say I want to compare version 1 and version 2, and run the report. I get a nice breakdown of the differences between the 2 selected versions. One other nice thing about the comparison report is if you are doing as-builting, you can easily compare your as-built version to your design version, and again, see what the differences in costs were between the 2. Okay, so let's say I'm ready to accept my estimate, and I want to build this out into a work plan. So I'm going to go ahead and select my first version, and as you can see here, we have this Accept Design button. You just go ahead and click that, and just like that, if we go back to our work order, you can see all of the labor, the materials, and if I had services or tools on my compatible units, those would have been added as well, but I just had labor and materials in this example. Those were all added to my planned labor and materials on my work order. So just like that, I now have a job plan in Varasset. So you just want to kind of summarize what we have for compatible units. So in summary, compatible units are a great way to perform your work management estimating. They're flexible enough to cover a wide variety of scenarios, and Varasset's filter and adder support make estimating for specific conditions quick and painless. The ability to templatize your estimates mean you'll be able to estimate common jobs within minutes and with minimal user input. Versioning provides you with a quick and easy way to compare different pricing strategies, so you can be sure you're designing your jobs with the right resources, and it doubles as a historical record of the design as it changes over time. And finally, with integration with Varasset work orders, It means that you can go from project design to a planned work order in seconds, as you saw with accepting the design and how quickly that added all of those materials and labor to your work order.
We really appreciate it. We hope you find these helpful. Our next user group will date to be determined, but it most likely will be the first week in February in 2020. I'm always open to user group topics. Our people get so involved in building this all the time that sometimes, you know, we're so close to it, we don't have, you know, always the best ideas. And what we want is from you, what do you want to learn the most? So if you have thoughts on that, please don't hesitate to contact us. Well, thank you. I think we're going to close it up now, but thanks for taking the time this morning.